Alright team, this video is a follow-up on the main video I put out last week. Essentially, I didn't have enough time to put everything I wanted to into that video. I ran out of time, it was getting long. So here we are. How's it going, chasers? I hope you're having a kick-ass week. So basically, last week's video was a bit of an eye-opener for me. First of all, that standard turbo stuff, yeah, it's not as good as most of the other stuff that I've tried, most of the other recipes I've tried, so on and so forth. But here's the thing, it's not nearly as bad as a whole lot of people make it out to be. It is not completely and utterly undrinkable, which is what everyone says, oh, it's so horrible, it's absolute shit. In my opinion, that's just not true. And the huge, huge advantage to it is that you can literally give someone the turbo system and all the T500 ingredients who has no idea about distilling, and as long as they actually read through the instructions properly and just do it step by step, they're going to pretty much get the same result as anyone else, because there's really no, like, the art in it has been taken out. It's just made to work. So of course it's not going to give a wonderful result. The art has been taken out of it. But you're going to be able to get a result quickly, and you're going to be able to build on that. You know, some people just need to get a win early to be able to get into a hobby. Some people would rather put the effort and the research and the book time in up front, and aim for a higher level product to get started with. There's nothing wrong with either one of those things. So yeah, I don't know. That essentially is the guts of this video. But let's get into some specifics, shall we? So first of all, let's look at all the tips and tricks, the 9 tips and tricks that I use to take the standard still spirits product and improve it while still staying within the turbo system, I guess you would call it. And I said I was going to rank them and give you a little bit more information about each. And if you don't want to do all 9 of them at once, you want to try them separately. Which ones do you start with? Which ones do you do at the end? Just so you know, guys, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, you probably want to go and watch this video first. Things will make a whole lot more sense after that, obviously. Now, these first 5 things, to be honest, guys, they're all really similar in my mind. They're all like, I don't know. I would suggest just doing all of these things, to be honest. But if I had to put them into order, this is the order they would be in. Cuts, more aggressive cuts. I've seen a few people comment in the comments and seen it elsewhere that if you're doing a reflux column, you just don't need to make cuts. I completely and utterly disagree. I haven't seen this up until now. This video has kind of flushed this thinking out, and I don't know where that comes from. Maybe it comes from the way that some commercial stills work. Maybe that's where it comes from. I don't know. But I'm here to tell you that yes, you really do need to make cuts. Coming off any type of still, really. This, especially if you're going for a smooth product, which a lot of home distillers do want to go for, you want to make cuts, guys. Double distilling is just an easy way to make your spirit run just so much more refined. It's done the heavy lifting already. It's taken a huge portion of the crap you don't want and gotten rid of it, so you can just get onto being specific in your distilling run about what you do and don't want. And in a still like the T500, that isn't going to get you to azeotrope easily, like almost ever. The higher the ABV in the wash, the closer you're going to get to azeotrope. It just gets you a slightly higher ABV, which means a slightly cleaner product as well. Better clearing of the wash. Now this is confusing to some people, and I'm going to answer some questions that you guys put into the video later on to make it a little bit more sense. But generally, no, I do not clear anything in the wash. The thing with the turbo product, in my mind, the thing about the turbo that's awesome is that it is specifically there to help people not fail. And that first step in not failing is make sure your fermentation completes and it ferments out dry. And that is the goal in turbo. It's not making it delicious in the fermentation, it's just get the damn thing fermented and get a relatively high yield so people can make a decent amount of booze. To do that, they got to put a whole lot of crap into the fermentation to make it like pretty much a bomb-proof fermentation. And it's all that crap in the fermentation wash that we don't want. Don't put that stuff in there in the first place. You don't need to take it back out again. But if you don't put the stuff in the first place, then you've got to be much better at knowing how to give a fermentation what it needs. You've got to be a better steward of the yeast. And the last video I made on turbo, this one here, was basically saying exactly that. Don't put the shit in, you don't need to take the shit out. And a whole lot of people didn't like what I had to say about that. Now a whole lot of people are saying, the opposite. So, yeah, yay, this is politics, I guess. Number 4, changing the yeast. And I put this at number 4, assuming that you still want to use turbo yeast. And the reason I put it down the list a little bit is that if you're going to change from turbo classic or turbo fast to the turbo pure, yes, I do believe it's going to improve things. I don't think it's going to improve things as much as the things above in this list. Now, in just a second, we're going to talk about what happens if you just get completely outside the turbo system. That's going to change things a whole lot, but it comes with other issues. So yes, change the turbo yeast, but do the other things first if you're just switching from one turbo to another. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. And the last one here is to lower the amount of sugar. Instead of aiming for 20% in the wash, drop that way back down to 16 at the max. And once again, I'm assuming that you're staying within the turbo range. If you're getting outside the turbo range, that's different, but within the turbo range, I would put that as, this is definitely the bottom of the rung for these first 5 points. So these next points come in my mind a fair bit below these first 5 we've talked about. So do these first 5 definitely if you want to improve the product from the turbo system. But these 3 are roughly in this order. Adding flavor and mouthfeel. I personally like these flavors and I like these mouthfeels. The reason it's way down here is it's not as important and it's not going to make as big of a difference as most of the things further up the list. If I was talking just purely about what I like, maybe it would come in at about number 4, but I don't know what you like. And it's entirely a personal preference. So I've put it down here. If you want to do it, that's cool. If you don't want to do it, that's cool. What I would really suggest you do is do one of each. Try with, try without, see what you like. That is the beauty of this hobby, is you get to decide what you want to make and the way you want to make it, and more importantly, what you want to drink and how much enjoyment you get out of the different things you drink based on how you made it. Fermentation temperature. While, yes, I do think this is important, and everything on this list I think is important, I just really do think that everything above this is going to give you a bigger leap and improvement on flavor. And the other reason I put it so far down on the list is that to really do it properly, you're going to need some more equipment. Pretty much everything else you don't need equipment for. You don't need to spend money on. You can just do it with what you already have. It comes in a similar vein or a similar idea to just lowering the amount of sugar you put into a wash, in that it reduces the stress on the yeast during fermentation. And it's probably going to surprise the hell out of people to have the whole running the still slower thing so far down on the list. But assuming you're using the T500, it kind of locks you into a very narrow bandwidth of how fast you're going to run the still anyway. And if you've already done the double distillation, I think, how do I put it? Doing a double distillation and then running the still as normal, in my opinion, is probably going to give you a better result than just running the still slower but not doing double distillation. I would rather do the double distillation and run it as normal. That's my opinion on it. But to be honest, out of everything I've said so far, this is probably the one that I feel the least conviction about saying that is right or correct. That is kind of really my feeling on the topic without a whole lot to back it up. I'd be interested to see what you guys have to say about that. Anyway, let's talk really quickly about what you should do or how you should go about moving outside the turbo range. And like I've said over and over again, the beauty of the turbo stuff is that it's just easy. You can just give people exact numbers and say, this is what you need to do, go do it. As soon as you move outside of that, it becomes much more of an art. It's much more of a decision tree. So certain things happen and you follow, through the best decisions to get to the end. Man, it's so hard to describe. The more you push for excellence, the closer you have to run to indecisiveness in terms of exactly what's going to happen. The more you open yourself up to having to just kind of go with the flow, I guess. So I'm not going to be able to tell you exactly how to do it here because that's tricky. But seeing as I've got like a minute and a half to do this, let me give you some really, really good tips on where to start down that journey. Number 1, obviously, switch up the yeast. That's kind of the whole point in this. There is a whole world of opportunities out there. There is a whole world of possibilities. in terms of the type of yeast you want to use, but assuming that we're kind of trying to compare apples with apples as much as we can, you're going to want to make a vodka or a neutral spirit. So honestly, you can get really damn good results with just bread yeast, and bread yeast can be really freaking cheap. So look into that. Number 2 is nutrients. Turbo works because it is yeast and nutrients all crammed into the same bag. You don't have to think about it, you just throw it on in there. If you switch to another yeast, you still need nutrients. Sugar is kind of like the bare minimum food for yeast to run on, and they need their, like we need vitamins and minerals and all sorts of stuff in our diet as well. Yeast do too, especially in the phase when they're dividing and multiplying. So there are a whole lot of different ways to go about this, literally thousands, literally thousands. If you want to read into it and look into it, please do, because the more knowledge you have, the more you can just sort of roll with these things and make it up as you go. But if you just want a specific recipe to get you started, I'll give you 3 that are very, very popular. Number 1 is the tomato paste wash, or bird watcher's wash. This is using tomato paste as nutrient. I know it sounds weird, it sounds wacky, but the stuff just works. So look that up. I've got a video on it. It's all over the forums. Search tomato paste or bird watchers, you'll find it. Number 2, Teddy Sad's fast fermenting vodka, TSFFV. This is still probably my favorite neutral. I love the stuff. One, because it works well and it ferments well, so on and so forth. But 2, it just sort of fits my personal flavor profile as well. I don't think it's necessarily better than tomato paste wash. It's just a flavor profile that I prefer. If you're into that, check it out as well. It's a little bit more involved, but it's not that bad. And number 3 is something that I haven't tried and I need to try, but a lot of people swear by it, which is the Kale Wash. Once again, use those keywords, do some Googling, you'll find it. If you can't be bothered doing the Googling and you can't be bothered finding it, this stuff isn't for you. Just use the turbo. Number 3, once you've switched to a different yeast and a different nutrient, lower the sugar. Just do it. Don't go for even 16%. 16% is crazy high. There are very specific ways that you can perhaps sort of push that without having adverse effects, but just if you haven't looked into this a lot and you haven't tried it, just take my word for it. Aim for kind of the 8 to 12% window, and 12% is sort of pushing high. 8% for a lot of people is standard. A lot of people say that's kind of low, whatever. And finally, if you're going this way, if you're forgetting about the turbo stuff, you can kind of forget for the most part about clearing your washes. I don't clear anything in that I don't add something extra to the wash to clear it out when it's finished. I'll let it sit for a few days, let the yeast flocculate out, just let it chill, but I won't add anything to it. I just do not think it's necessary. And seeing as we've stepped away from turbo, the 2 big advantages here are that we're not using a really crazy fast fermentation, so that's not as stressed out. There's going to be less dead yeast cells kicking around. And number 2 is we haven't added a whole bunch of nutrients that aren't actually going to be used up. This is my speculation, but I think that's where the turbo flavor comes from. We haven't put them in there, so we don't need to take them out. So you don't need to clear the wash. And for similar reasons, you're probably not going to need to carbon filter at the end either. Once again, if you don't have those off flavors in there, you're not going to need to take them out. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. So I guess the summary of all of this is if you want to put some extra work into it, you can totally make a better product than turbo wash. You can. I mean, obviously it's a subjective sort of thing. If you just prefer the taste of turbo, that's cool, man. Like, you do you. I've got no problem with that whatsoever. That is the beauty, like I keep saying, of this hobby. You get to make the thing that you want your way. If you want to put some more effort into it and do some research, do some learning, and take a step past that, there's a whole new world out there for you in terms of both the ingredients you can use. Like, go down to the supermarket and have a look around, and you'll suddenly start to see ingredients sitting on the supermarket shelf just sort of morphing and turning into a bottle of vodka or whiskey or whatever sitting in front of your face. It's pretty cool. But for those of you that have already been doing that for years and years and years, or you're the sort of person that just loves doing 100 hours of research on a new hobby before you actually get started, realize that not everyone is the same as you. It doesn't have to be the same for everyone else. I don't understand, I don't get why some people want to essentially yuck someone else's yum. You don't get to do that. You don't know what they taste. You don't know what they enjoy. You don't know why they enjoy it. So let them do them, let you do you, and we can all be decent human beings to each other. Anyway, I thought I would grab a few questions from that past video, throw them up on screen, and basically just answer them out loud, because it's easier to talk rather than type, to fill out a little bit more information, but also share it with other people, because I figure these are the sort of things that potentially a few people are thinking or wondering, and they're not going to go back and read the comments again. Cool. So number one, is turbo carbon a stand-in for something else that is usually used? Is it standard to add activated carbon when fermenting, or is it just turbo pumping up sales? Honestly, dude, it's neither. I don't think it's either. They're not doing it just for the sake of doing it to sell you something else. I don't use it in anything else. How can that be true? How can both of these statements that I've just said be true? And the answer is that, like I said earlier on, the turbo system is made to not fail. That's in my opinion, the beauty of it. Whether that's what it was originally created for, I don't know. But that's its reason to exist right now, is it's easy for people to get into it. The way they do that is they throw a shit ton of stuff into the wash that just make the yeast ferment under a huge amount of different circumstances and get it through to being relatively fermented out every time. The downside of that is now you've got a bunch of shit in the wash that you don't really want to drink, and it doesn't taste great. So the other products they add in, the filtering, the turbo clear, and what was the other one? The carbon, I think was what you actually mentioned. They all go in there to try and reduce the impact of that stuff on the final product. So if you're going to use turbo, now that I've tried it all and comparing it back to the result that I got from that first time I used turbo, 100% use these things. They make it better. But, like I keep saying, if you want to put some more effort into researching things and just going with the flow, with the process a little bit more, understanding what is actually happening in the process so you know how to respond when something happens, not just being really strict in terms of number one happens and then I do step two and then I do step three. If you want to be like a yeast custodian, a yeast farmer more, and you're happy to do that, move out of the turbo ecosystem, and then you're definitely not going to need the carbon stuff in the wash. Most people will not use any form of clearing agent in their wash. Some people do, some people still appreciate it. I don't think it's necessary. And most people will find that they do not need to carbon filter either. That's my take on it. I can't believe he didn't actually rate them out of something, like 1 to 10. Okay, dude, this is actually good feedback. I've been thinking of doing this for a long time, and it's nice to hear some community feedback on this. So here's the plan, guys. I'm going to argue both sides of my brain for this. I'm going to say why I didn't do it, and then I'm going to play devil's advocate and say why I should do it. And you guys in the comments down below, tell me which Jesse is right. So the first up is the reason I haven't done it so far is because this stuff is so freaking subjective. What I've tried to do is give you things that I objectively taste or objectively think about a product from what I sense. And then I try to not say whether that is a good thing or a bad thing, because I don't want to impose my personal preference on you and say that, you know, for example, whatever, this is a whiskey, I taste banana, therefore whiskey bad. And that's what I've been trying to not do. Obviously that specific example is bullshit. I just made that up on the spot. So I've tried to kind of keep it loose. The other reason is that rating something out of 10. So what are we rating it for? Are we rating it for how close it was to the, you know, how well did we complete the brief? You know, what did we set out to do and did we do that? Just how yum is it? How technically good is it? You know, there's a lot of different ways that we could measure this and give a number. And once again, if that's not really obvious, it's going to be misleading. Cool. The flip side of the coin is, why don't you just do that? It would be nice, for example, for someone to pull up 2 recipes that I've made and just take the last minute of the video, put them next to each other and be able to see which one they think is better so they can decide which one to do. I kind of get that. That would be cool. But once again, is that misleading? Is it making it too easy for people to jump to conclusions that I don't mean, or that were never intended, or that are just straight up untrue? But perhaps we could do like a 5-point system, you know, like literally just how yum is it? Jesse's personal preference scale out of 10. How good was it at completing the brief? How close is it to a commercial style? You know, all those things that I was worried about before. Maybe we break them out into those and I can put that at the end of a video. Up to you guys, you let me know. Number 3, new to the channel, are you a Kiwi? Yes, dude, I am. Well, technically, born in Australia, but don't hold that against me. Number 4, sheesh, that phony intro was brutal, just sad. I don't know what the hell you're talking about, dude, because you haven't given any context. I'm assuming either you just do not like me being sponsored by Still Spirits, or you didn't like the little sort of comedy bit that I put in there. Either way, you talk like someone who doesn't deserve any respect, so I don't really give a shit. If you're going to drop a joke or poke fun at me, by all means, please do it. Drop a /s at the end so people know that you're being sarcastic or you're just having some fun. The problem is that it's now on the internet harder to tell whether something is so ridiculous that it is someone being funny or whether actually someone is just that ridiculous. So you need to, I don't know, you just need to act with a bit of respect in the comments. So the only reason I'm bringing this up is, guys, is as the channel grows, it's going to turn into a bigger and bigger problem. It's just a problem with YouTube. I have no problem whatsoever with people calling me out on my bullshit. Do it with respect or everyone is just going to assume you're an asshole and ignore you. Number 5, how does it stack up against Teddy Sad's fast fermenting vodka? And I guess to throw into that as well, the guy that actually made Teddy Sad's fast fermenting vodka basically says, compare this to TPW or TFFV. If you took someone off the street who's never distilled a drop, 2 people, and you put them in 2 rooms, one person, you gave them all of the T500 equipment and the T500 ingredients, and in the other you give them the ingredients for Teddy Sad's fast fermenting vodka and a still, and you tell this person read the instructions that come with the box, and you tell this person find the instructions on a forum and read through the forum page and, you know, and figure out how to make it. And you gave them, you know, like 2 weeks to have a final product, including ferment and everything. I am guessing that the person with the T500 products is more consistently going to produce a product that is much nearer the skill ceiling than the person with the Teddy Sad's fast fermenting vodka. So to put it into gaming terms, the Turbo 500 stuff is a much more rudimentary champion. It has a lower skill cap, but it's easier to learn. And the exact inverse is true of Teddy Sad's fast fermenting vodka. Huge skill cap. You can get this stuff to be really nice, but the learning curve to make it is much higher. Although in saying that, the second version was actually quite reminiscent of it. Different flavors, obviously, because of the different grains that we used. The one that I made with the tips and tricks actually had a more full and velvety mouthfeel, but it didn't have as much crispness and cleanness as the FFV I've made in the past. But I was actually pretty surprised at how close the two are together. And I went back and I literally just tasted them side by side, because I've got a wee bit of the last FFV I made still sitting around. It's kind of like comparing a McDonald's burger to a homemade burger. Yeah, I can make a damn good burger at home. It's going to be a whole lot better than McDonald's burger. But that's because I've put a whole lot of time into learning how to cook and specifically understanding what makes a burger awesome. You take someone who just doesn't care about that sort of stuff, like my wife, for example, awesome person, no knock on her whatsoever, hates cooking, I'll take the McDonald's burger. Anyway, I hope this sheds some light on the situation, I really do. If you liked it, you know what to do. Typical YouTube stuff. I'll catch you next time, guys. Keep on chasing the craft. See ya.